we're going to talk about the options you have for printing your InDesign CS6 document. And to do that and to illustrate it, I'm going to go to the File pull-down menu and select the Print menu command. You can see that the keyboard shortcut I have here is Command P. If you're working with a Windows PC, your keyboard shortcut would be Control P. I'm going to click on that menu command to open the Print dialog box. Now, as I look at this, there are a couple of things that we can adjust and set to work within this dialog box. I have 8 different options for areas that I can set how that will print. I have a little proxy over here to the lower left that actually shows how this smaller page would print on the regular size sheet that I have selected on the screen. I have buttons down here to the bottom to where I could change the page setup. I could change the printer parameters. We're talking about the hardware that exists at the end of our print job, not the settings we're setting in software for the beginning here of our print job. And if I have presets loaded in, which I can do for printing the same way I can do for pages that we create, I could actually save a preset or select that preset right up here at the top of our print dialog box. Now beneath that, you'll see the options that we have available for printing this job. In this case, when I go to this, it'll show I have the option to output a PostScript file, or I'll be able to print to the printer that I have connected to my network here today, a Dell Laser Printer 5210N duplex laser printer. The number of copies I can set, I can make one or as many as I can print on my output device. I have the option to collate if they're multi-page documents. So if I'm printing 3 pages, it will go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3 to place 3 documents already arranged the way I'd like them to be, as opposed to printing 3 pages of page 1, of page 2, and then page 3 that I'll have to collate by hand. I also have the option to specify those to print in reverse order, so 3, 2, 1 instead of 1, 2, 3 for the example we were talking about previously. I can print all the pages, or I can print any single page or range of pages that I choose for the document. If I'm going to print 2-sided documents by hand, literally printing one side and then taking that page out, turning it over, and printing the other side, I have the ability to print only the even pages or the odd pages, so I can set that sequence to manually duplex those documents. I can print the pages, or I can print 2-page reader spreads. Basically output the same thing I see on my screen if I select the Facing Pages option and can see those pages side by side, as well as to print master pages if that's what I choose to do. Now, InDesign has the ability to lay content on individual layers. We'll talk about that in more detail later in this InDesign CS6 course. But I can choose to print only the visible layers, and the ones that I set are printable, or I can print all of them, whether I can actually see those layers or not. And between that, I have other options to print non-printing objects, so registration marks that I may draw in manually, or crop marks that I may put in manually as opposed to let InDesign do that itself. I'll show you where those options are shortly. I can print blank pages, or I can print any visible guides and baseline grids. And these blue lines that we can normally see on screen but would not print, if I check that box, they'll actually be on our final printed output. Now the second option that we have is to define setup. Here I can define whatever page sizes that I have available within the printer driver that I'm using, and can define that. And I can also set the positioning of that page if I choose to turn it sideways, for example, or I choose to print it upside down. I have those options to do that right here. I can scale that page either by manual percentage number to make it larger or smaller than it originally is. If I check the Constrain Proportions box, it will allow me to change those proportionately. So I won't artificially distort my job when I print it. Or I could let InDesign define scale to fit, which would take my job and actually pull it up or down to the point where it would fit on my entire page. Now by default, my page positioning is set to the upper left of whatever sheet I'm running through the output device. And I can actually see that right here in the proxy. I have the options to center that along one dimension, say horizontally, to put that in the middle but the top. Or I can center it amongst both the horizontal and vertical dimensions by simply selecting this option right here. And that's what I normally use as a default setting for myself. The next area allows me to set marks and bleeds for printing this. And I'm actually going to zoom in here just a little bit so I can show you what that looks like in more detail. If I choose to print the crop marks, the spot where I want to cut the content off for my smaller page, as it shows right here in this proxy, I simply click this crop marks box and it'll show that it'll set little areas to define where I trim that smaller document when it's built on the larger sheet. If I want to not only specify where the crop is set, but my bleed area, remember we have images and we have color builds that run outside the actual page size that we're using, I can click this bleed marks and you'll see those proxy symbols look just a little bit larger here as we're working on screen. If I'm doing commercial printing work for process color or spot color, I can add registration marks or color bars, which make it easier for me to line those things up and see that I'm getting a good quality print job while that's being run on the press. And for administrative purposes, I can also include the page information here. And what that would allow me to do is it would allow me to print the name of the file that I'm printing, as well as the date and time down here to the lower right that was actually printed. I'm going to zoom back out now. And when I do that, we'll go to the next tab, the Output tab, to show options that we have for this. Now in my case, I'm working with a black and white laser printer. But if I was working with a color inkjet printer or a commercial offset direct-to-press operation, I could set that to print to composite colors if I'm working with that. Or if I'm working with a conventional web press or setting up pre-pressed materials for them, I could actually print out the individual separations that would be needed to create this print job. I have options for specifying what I do with graphics here. I can set this for optimized subsampling, which basically runs the resolution to match with whatever output device I'm using, or I could use the option to send all of that information or just not send the images at all if I want to print out something where I just want to print the copy or if I'm troubleshooting problems with my job. Similarly, with the fonts, I can simply print the characters that are actually used in my job. So for example, if I'm not printing in French, I don't need a C with a cedilla. Or if I'm not printing Sie Deutsch, I don't need a U with an umlaut over the top of it. Or what I can do is I can simply ship the default setting of the complete character set right there. I'll also have options listed down here depending on what type of output device I'm working with, and this will give me options to set exactly how the rules for that printer can be done. I have rules for color management if I'm working with a high-end print job with color correction. I have some advanced functions for dealing with open press interface image or content replacement, as well as how my printer will process transparency. Many output devices cannot handle transparency settings that are available in InDesign CS6, and this will allow me to set some rules to mitigate those factors or to override that entirely. This final option we have for the summary is basically a report of every option that we've just set when we were working through this print dialog box. Now you probably don't need this to run off a proof on a LaserJet or a color printer that's set right next to your desk. But if you're shipping that job out for commercial printing, some of these settings can be very important to your commercial printer for troubleshooting potential problems or seeing how you had actually created your job. That's why, if you choose to, you can actually save this summary as a text file to output that information. But we've got our settings built the way we'd like them to be. So if yours match mine that we set, we'll just click on this print button and we'll have completed this chapter of our InDesign CS6 class.